In a world that is always in a hurry to forget, why has the death of Yu Menglong become a wound that refuses to close? Nearly 100 days have passed, but instead of the stillness of the grave, we witness a fierce undercurrent of unanswered questions and hundreds of thousands of signatures demanding justice. Could it be that behind those stage lights lay not glory, but an invisible cage that swallowed a proud soul? If you feel the warmth of the prayer lamps and the weight of the hidden truth, a like or see subscription at this moment is how we maintain the link to justice together. Stand with me so that the story of Yu Menglong never sinks into oblivion. Only one day later, at an ancient temple, hundreds of lamps were lit throughout the night. Initially, the organizers expected 300 lamps as a symbolic ritual. However, the actual number far exceeded their projections. Light followed light, stretching endlessly, as if each lamp was an unanswered question, and each prayer was a refusal to accept a story ending too abruptly. On a global scale, the signatures on the petition have surpassed the mark of 727,000, and that number continues to rise. These facts reveal an undeniable reality. The story of Yu Menglong has not closed. It is no longer just the private pain of a family, nor merely the memory of fans. It has become a public issue where emotions, suspicions, and the need to clarify the truth are tightly intertwined. When the majority persists in asking questions, a rushed conclusion becomes unconvincing. Behind the wreaths, the farewells, and the commemorative rituals, a silent but persistent question remains. What truly happened in the final years of Yu Menglong's life? Was he truly in control of his life and career? Or was he caught in a system where the power of decision did not belong to the person standing on the stage? When an artist continuously disappears from the spotlight, when abnormal signs appear repeatedly, can it all be mere coincidence? It is at this intersection between grief and skepticism that the public investigation begins. Not through direct accusations, but by scrutinizing the smallest details, from music, images, and contracts to the power relationships standing behind the entertainment industry. Because behind the glamour and official explanations, a larger question waits to be answered. What mechanisms operated in the darkness, and was the tragedy of Yu Menglong the result of a long chain of control that very few dared to speak against? Looking back at the final years of Yu Menglong's life, many people have begun to realize that the abnormal signs did not appear suddenly. They existed sporadically and faintly, enough to be ignored at the time, but they became striking when placed together after the tragedy. Like many other stories in the entertainment world, everything was initially covered by a dense work schedule, stage lights, and strictly controlled images. It is precisely this that makes the smallest details become important clues. One of the most mentioned details is the cover version of the song Encounter that Yu Menglong once performed. At the time of its release, the performance did not cause controversy. It was only when the online community listened back to every lyric, even slowing it down and comparing every syllable, that attention focused on a very subtle change in pronunciation. That difference, if heard casually, is almost impossible to detect. But for those who listen closely, a lyric originally meaning helplessness before fate seemed to transform into a different message, evoking a sense of being deprived of self-determination. There is no evidence that this change was intentional, but it is precisely that ambiguity that has made many people shiver upon looking back. Why wouldn't such a small detail cause listeners to shudder? Music was not the only sign. In a video circulating online, Yu Menglong appeared at a fan signing event. That moment, in theory, was a normal interaction, almost a mandatory duty for an artist. However, while he was signing and chatting, a man standing next to him pulled his hand back, signaling him to stop in a hurried manner. The scene lasted only a few seconds, short enough to be seen as a routine backstage arrangement, but long enough to make viewers sense the awkwardness. Many later comments suggested that even a small act like signing an autograph was not within his power to decide. Those suspicions became even heavier when a shocking photograph began to circulate on online platforms. The photo was allegedly taken in a restricted space with a gloomy and suffocating atmosphere. In the frame, a person, believed to be Yu Menglong, sits in a chair, his body in a restrained position, surrounded by other characters engaged in inexplicable actions. There is no official confirmation regarding the origin or context of the photo. Some argue it is merely a provocative work of art. Others see in it an image of prolonged abuse. Where the truth lies remains undetermined, but the fierce public reaction shows that the level of suspicion has surpassed the normal threshold. The common thread of all these details is that they are not strong enough to serve as independent evidence. Each detail, if separated, can be explained in many different ways. A pronunciation might just be a personal habit. A restraining gesture might be due to a rushed schedule. A photo might just be an artistic staging. However, when placed together in the context of an artist whose appearances were continuously restricted, whose career was frozen, and who lived in a strictly managed environment, the overall picture begins to become deeply concerning. What haunts the public is not just the question of whether Yu Menglong was controlled, but why these signs existed for so long without anyone speaking up. In an industry where images are carefully constructed and power is concentrated in the hands of a few, the boundary between management and control becomes fragile. If an artist truly falls into a state of being unable to self-determine, what paths are left for them to call for help? It is here that the public debate shifts from emotion to analysis. Some argue that everything is merely overinterpretation following a tragedy. Others believe these were the last faint signals, only recognized when everything was already too late. Regardless of which side one takes, it is difficult to deny that these details have opened the first and most important question. Was Yu Menglong truly free in his final years, or was he trapped in a system where silence became the condition for existence? If the signs in the previous stage raised doubts about Yu Menglong's personal and spiritual life, then by tracing the trail of contracts and management relationships, the story begins to shift to a deeper level. This is no longer an issue of an individual being treated unfairly, but a picture of how power operates in the entertainment industry, where the artist is often only the most vulnerable link. Yu Menglong debuted to the public through a selection program, quickly attracting attention thanks to his appearance and performance ability. In the year 2013, he signed a long-term contract with his first management company. Conventionally, this type of contract is promoted as a guarantee for a professional future. In return, the artist accepts a comprehensive arrangement of their schedule, image, and developmental direction. On paper, this is a partnership. In reality, the power of initiative usually leans heavily toward the company. By the year 2018, signs of rift began to appear. Yu Menglong publicly expressed a desire to terminate the contract, even taking steps to show he was seeking new opportunities outside the old system. The reaction was swift and cold. Fan club activities were restricted, media appearances dropped sharply, and efforts to cancel the contract yielded no results. Instead of a transparent breakup, the relationship entered a state of prolonged tug-of-war. After the contract ended, the silence became even more pronounced. For many years, Yu Menglong almost disappeared from major projects. No official announcement, no clear explanation. In the entertainment world, such a phase is often called by a familiar term that is rarely spoken directly: being frozen. It is a state where the artist is not completely banned, but neither are they provided with the conditions to truly exist. The career falls into a gray area where every door is left ajar. Only when he signed a contract with a new management company did Yu Menglong's appearances gradually return. However, close observers noticed that the same familiar faces still appeared beside him. This led to a pivotal question. Did he truly leave the old system, or did only the surface change? When the online community began to dig deep into the ownership structures and links between companies, the picture of power gradually emerged. Public data shows that many companies that seem independent actually have complex cross-shareholding relationships. A large capital corporation stands behind them, holding shares in many different media and entertainment units. From content production and distribution to artist management, this network forms a closed ecosystem. In such a structure, changing management companies does not mean escaping control. It is merely moving from one branch to another within the same system. Accounts from industry insiders make the picture even clearer. A director of an entertainment program once shared that, in the process of planning to invite artists, Yu Menglong was almost never considered, even though, in terms of image and recognition, he was perfectly suited. The reason lay not in personal ability, but in the attitude of the management company. Not being pushed meant being excluded from the cycle of opportunity, regardless of potential. The public response to this information is not uniform. One segment argues that this is the normal operations of the entertainment industry, where fierce competition forces companies to prioritize their own interests. Another segment sees a more serious problem. When power is concentrated in a few organizations, artists have almost no ability to protect themselves. Silence, in this case, is not a choice, but a condition for continued existence. The impact of this control system does not stop at a single individual. It creates an environment where artists learn to avoid, not speak up, and not resist. Those who try to escape often pay the price with years of isolation. It is in this context that the story of Yu Menglong is seen not just as an individual tragedy, but as a prime example of how invisible power can determine human fate. As the pieces gradually connect, the question is no longer who is right or wrong, but whether such a system has room for individual freedom. And if not, then what is the price that an artist must pay to maintain silence after all? The darkest phase in Yu Menglong's story did not take place in public, but in the prolonged silence when he nearly disappeared from entertainment life. That absence was not loud or dramatic, but it was deeply destructive. For an artist, being deprived of the opportunity to appear means gradually losing one's voice, losing the connection with the audience, and finally losing the sense of existence within one's own profession. Many in the industry admit that this silent isolation is the greatest mental pressure because it leaves no clear traces to resist. During that time, Yu Menglong still appeared sporadically in a few projects, but failed to create a stable momentum for development. Each appearance felt like a half-hearted comeback, not enough to restore his position, nor enough to escape the feeling of being monitored. Close observers realized that, although his name had not completely disappeared, his career trajectory had been predetermined, with clear and difficult-to-surpass limits. Everything only truly changed after the tragedy occurred. When the news broke out, the questions that existed within small communities began to explode on a large scale. This time, attention was not only focused on Yu Menglong as an individual, but spread to the entire network surrounding him. Professional relationships, contracts, and especially the power structure behind entertainment companies were brought to light. What was once considered standard practice now became an object of scrutiny. One of the clearest signs of the shock was the market's reaction. The stock of the involved media corporations dropped sharply in a short period, leading to significant financial losses. Emergency shareholder meetings were convened, showing that the pressure came not only from public opinion, but from the investors themselves. In that context, the silence that was once a safe strategy now became a risk. Parallel to the financial volatility was the withdrawal of many individuals. Some artists and related figures began to restrict their appearances, locked their comment sections on social media, or issued statements denying personal relationships. These actions, though defensive, unintentionally reinforced the feeling that the system was in a state of alarm. When those who once stood outside the controversy also rushed to create distance, the public became even more convinced that the story behind was more complex than what was being announced. The spread of the case was also evident in how seemingly unrelated connections were pulled into the vortex of suspicion. The questions raised did not aim to confirm guilt, but to clarify the responsibility and the level of knowledge of each individual. In that atmosphere, every small move was interpreted, and every statement was analyzed from multiple angles. This was the moment when the control system, accustomed to operating in silence, was forced to face public pressure. What is noteworthy is the shift in the public's attitude. If, in the early stages, the interest primarily stemmed from grief and curiosity, at this stage, it took on the color of a collective interrogation. Not a few people questioned the moral responsibility of the entertainment industry, where profit and power can override the safety and dignity of human beings. Phrases shared widely reflected the common mood. When a large enough system is shaken, no one can claim to be entirely innocent. At the peak of this wave, Yu Menglong's story no longer stood alone. It became a symbol of the silent fear of many other artists, those who understood the price of speaking out all too well. The previous silence, once considered a wise choice, was now replaced in a different setting. When the consequences of silence became clear, a larger question emerged. Does keeping one's distance truly protect anyone, or does it only prolong the cycle of similar tragedies? It was at this point that the system began to show cracks. Not because a final conclusion had been reached, but because the pressure forced it to react. And in that reaction, the most important thing did not lie in who was criticized, but in the fact that the public had recognized the power of not forgetting, not overlooking, and not accepting a story closing when there were still too many unanswered questions. After all the analysis and facts, what remains is not just the grief for Yu Menglong, but a vast void of insecurity spreading throughout the entertainment space. Behind the brilliant glow, there seem to exist gears that crush the right of self-determination, where human beings are sometimes reduced to tools and dissenting voices are suppressed by prolonged silence. Was his death the alarm bell for a system where the price of fame is the minimum freedom of a human being? This story forces us to look back at the fragile boundary between management and control, between the safety of silence and the price of speaking out. For many years, silence was considered a shield, but this case has proven that silence sometimes only helps maintain a harmful structure. The future remains open, and many questions may never have a complete answer. But certainly, Yu Menglong has become a painful landmark, a reminder that behind every stage, light is a vulnerable soul, and behind every power system is an unavoidable responsibility. The final question is not for those who have passed away, but for us. Will this tragedy be the beginning of a change, or just a long sigh that vanishes into the void? The journey to find justice sometimes begins with refusing to forget. With just one subscription or like, you have joined me in keeping the flame of truth from being extinguished in the night of silence. Please leave your thoughts below, because every comment is a step that brings us closer to the light.